that's me! That's a big frickin' me! What's up, everybody? Long time no see. I say that in jest if, of course, you've been hanging out with me for the last 4 hours. Yeah, let's, good a place as any right there to throw down the video frame. I am, of course, your host, Tragically HP, coming to you live from the 100th Meridian, where maybe the exact feeling is on the other side of that feeling. Still seeking, still searching, still fighting. And music levels, and maybe a little lower there. Hopefully match up a little better with my own audio here. I know last one of these tutorials I had a comment from somebody saying that they were having a hard time hearing me. They could hear me clear, but the music was a tad loud, so it's always a bit of a balancing act there. Now, coming over here to this window, we're going to get right into some 5e mechanics here. Some basic stuff. We're going to use the same character sheet that I created last weekend for the Roll20 tutorial, the Wizard Level 1 Daniel. Now, just to kind of peruse over the basic elements of the character sheet here, we're talking completely fresh to 5e, D&D in general. You're not really sure what a lot of the mechanics or the rules or how all this kind of pieces together to make the game of D&D. Well, your primary information is right here, as we can see at the top of the character sheet. I can't really highlight it, but I'm dragging my cursor around. You can definitely make that out. Character name. Character class. Now, I wonder if... Yeah, once again, the drag drop does not transfer over for some reason. But all of the classes that you have options for will be here. Your classic options: fighter, rogue, wizard, cleric. Those are your classic 4. Everything else is kind of a derivative of that, or was created after that. It encompasses parts of those classic 4. Your barbarians, your paladins, your rangers, your sorcerers, your bards, warlocks, etc. All of those are certainly open to be played in the open table games anyway. Check with your GM if you're looking for which class options they are looking for, or if you want to compose a good party balance. If you're joining a group of 3 or 4 players, odds are you might be able to craft something that brings a unique addition to their group. So always worth checking that out. Subclass, you do not get that until level 3, I believe, universally for any class. So that is one of the downsides of multi-classing. If you take more than one class with your character, it takes you a little longer to specialize, i.e. subclass, in any of those classes. Races, similar to classes. Well, this one doesn't give a drop-down menu. This you just would type in manually, probably because the drop-down menu would extend the entire length of the character sheet, especially with the items we have in our compendium. There are a lot. Sub-race, not every race is going to have this option. Even for human, though, they do give you standard or variant human option. Creature type, humanoid is usually going to be the case unless you're playing a centaur or a monstrous race, I should say. The next major part of your character sheet that you need to know are your attributes. These are the 6 numbers listed down here. They are universal to every edition of D&D. They have always been strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Some systems have added an additional 7th stat. Honor sometimes is one of those. Sanity can be another 7th stat. 5e has options to include those if you're playing a samurai type campaign or a campaign where reputation is as important as gold, so your honor stat you want to keep high, because of course if you're playing dishonorable characters, people tend to hear about that shit. And as always with all editions of D&D, your stats range on average from 3 to 18, depending on what you're playing. Sometimes you'll have something that's higher than an 18. It's very rare you're going to have anything that's lower than a 3. And strength, of course, this represents just what it appears to. This is your character's natural brawn, their power, their ability to arm wrestle, grapple people to the ground. My wizard Daniel is pretty decent at strength. You don't see a whole lot of wizards rolling around with a 14 strength, so this guy definitely does his push-ups and his exercises every morning, albeit we can see from the result in the chat log my dice roll was pretty poor, so even with a +2 modifier because of my strength, I still only get a 9, unless for some reason I had advantage, in which case we use the higher number. Disadvantage, the lower number. The attributes themselves are the lower numbers in the circle. The larger number is your modifier, which is determined by whatever your attribute is. Usually, like an 8 or a 9 tends to be the low point for most characters. Some characters you'll see something like a 6 or a 7, or even as low as a 4 or 5. I think one of our open table characters does have a 3 in something. If not a 1, I think they might have actually just dropped something to a 1 completely, which is not good, because if any stat reaches a 0, it tends to be just downright paralyzing, if not deadly, to that character. Your dexterity, like your strength, is one of your physical attributes. The top 3 attributes are your physical, the bottom 3 are your mental. Dexterity represents not necessarily your character's speed. We see the speed reflected here where I'm highlighting, and your dexterity has nothing to do with that. Dexterity is more hand-eye coordination, balance, and agility, things of that nature. If you're using a character who uses ranged weapons, bows and arrows, guns, thrown weapons, your dexterity tends to be the stat that you use. If you're a strength-based character, some of those tossed weapons, I believe, will use your strength stat as well, so it can kind of benefit either side. Constitution is your character's overall health. Now, dexterity, I rolled a pretty decent one there for Daniel, unless, of course, I had disadvantage, in which case I rolled a natural 1. Eek. Constitution, your character's general health and well-being on a physical level. Wisdom kind of represents that more on a mental level. Now, Constitution tends to not have a lot of direct in-game effects mechanically like your strength and your dexterity do, especially if you're a fighting type character. You're often going to be relying on your strength or your dexterity heavily. A Constitution, not necessarily. The only real in-game effect that it has on a consistent basis is to influence your total hit point pool, which in the case of Daniel here as a -1, that's bad, because at level 1 wizard I get max hit points, which should be 6, but because I have a 5 Constitution, or a 9 Constitution, I have 5 hit points thanks to that -1 modifier right there. But if you're using standard array for your character generation, odds are you're going to have a 9, unless you put that in one of the stats that your race gets a bonus to. But so you got to pick and choose what you want to be your high stats, what you want to be your low stats. If you want to, over the course of your character's career, kind of plot out the stats that start high, I want to build them even higher. Or the stats that started low, I'd like to kind of build them up to equal the higher stats so I'm pretty well-rounded across the board. It really depends on what kind of character you're looking at. Intelligence used to directly influence how many skills you got. I don't think that's the case anymore in 5e. From what limited character creation protocols I've gone through, your skills are determined entirely from the class that you choose. You get a list of choose 2 or 3 of these skills, and I didn't see anything about plus your intelligence modifier in skills as previous editions would gift. And then whatever background you choose. Some of those backgrounds are going to give you unique abilities, extra equipment, or possibly even extra skills, which would be another way of obtaining proficiency in skills. So your primary thing for intelligence is, of course, knowledge. We do have a number of skills that deal directly in intelligence. Arcana, history, investigation. Oh, looks like it's Poplu's walk time, so hold off on that for a little bit here till I take a break. Nature also an intelligence-based skill, as is religion. So right there, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 skills that are based off of religion, and at least 3 of them are pretty heavily called upon on a regular basis, at least in my games. Arcana, history, and actually 4 of them, nature and religion. Investigation it kind of goes hand in hand with perception. There's still a little ambiguity that we haven't really been able to exactly nail down as far as what's the difference between perception and investigation. For the time being, though, we've kind of let either slide, just as the same case with athletics and acrobatics. If your character's more dexterous, then they're going to try to evade dexterously. If they're more of a powerhouse, they're just going to try to rush their way through. Wisdom is, in addition, intelligence also determines, if you're playing a wizard character like mine, what your spell save DC is. So if I go to the spell save thing here, it's a DC 12. It's not the greatest. It is based off of a set number of 8 plus your proficiency bonus, which is 2 for my guy, plus my intelligence modifier, which is 2. So I've got 8 plus 2 plus 2, which gives me 12. It's not uncommon to have first level characters that'll have a 13 or a 14 spell save DC because they want that 18 stat right in that block and just start off as badass as they can be. No right or wrong way to play it. Now, for wisdom, this is your common sense and your intuition, your gut, more so than what you've put the knowledge that you more so than the knowledge that you've put into your head. Wisdom also determines your mental well-being and resilience, just as Constitution does. Whereas if you have a poison gas trap that is sprung in your area, your GM is more than likely going to call for a Constitution saving throw, because your Constitution is holding your breath, or if a little bit of that gas gets in, how hardy are you to be able to stave off those effects? Wisdom is the mental side of that. If you've got somebody trying to use a magical charm against you, or even a non-magical charm, if you encounter somebody that's just particularly very charming and very good at getting their own way because their persuasion check tends to have a +8 or a +10 to start, your GM may call for maybe not a wisdom saving throw, maybe more of an insight check. Because insight is kind of the opposite of deception, not necessarily the opposite of persuasion. You can determine if they have ulterior motives with insight if they're using persuasion, But if they're using persuasion, there's really no counter for it that I'm aware of, other than your character just being like, well, I mean, yeah, you are incredibly charming and it's very difficult to turn you down, but I'm going to have to throw you a big fat no on that one. And let me throw this to a BRB while I change up the music, which seems to have expired. Let's have... why not? We'll use this one. That should play. Back to the live scene here. Back to the attributes. So, wisdom, your mental resilience, your mental well-being. For a lot of the divine type characters, I'm using 3E terminology in this respect as well. I don't know that 5E has the same differentiation, as far as arcane is more of wizards and sorcerers, and divine is more of clerics, paladins, druids. I still like to keep that separation. I feel it's a very easy definition to precisely nail down these classes from these classes. So when I say things like arcane, that's what I'm talking about. When I say things like divine, that's what I'm talking about. Wisdom is going to determine your cleric or your druid's spell save DC, much like the wizard's spell save DC. And it may even grant you extra prepared spells, depending on the 5E magic mechanics. Again, this is a 5E tutorial, but I'm not going to delve too much into a lot of specific mechanics, more of general mechanics. And yeah, spell access is pretty general, but I tend to stick more towards the GM side of the table. Mostly for time constraints, partly because I enjoy being surprised at the table on occasion when players are able to spring a new ability that I've not heard of before, or use an ability that we're aware of in unforeseen ways. Now, charisma, look at that. My wizard is a, well, I mean, yeah, it just says it all right here. Can't deny. That's right, you know you like looking at it. The 16 charisma right there with a +3 modifier. That's, of course, going to influence skills like deception. Is your character gambling and trying to bluff the other players at the table? Intimidation, as I start rolling incredibly low on these things because I'm not very good at bluffing or intimidation in general. What else is based off charisma? Performance. If I were to break out the musical instrument, yeah, 10, about average. Seems about right. Persuasion. If you try to convince somebody of something, likewise about average, even with the +3. But natural charisma, 22, seemed to roll out pretty well. And side note on intimidation, and really any skill, this is kind of one of those unspoken rules in 5E. And here I'm just kind of clicking nonsense, just going through the skills alphabetically for no reason. And there's my natural 20s, 3 out of 4, with an 18 in between them. If, I was getting a kind message here on the side, so I kind of lost a little bit of track. If you're using any skill in 5E, regardless of what this little parenthetical information here says, as far as athletics is based off of strength, deception is based off of charisma, this is the standard. And even with that, I would say 9 out of 10 times. More often than not, if somebody's using perception, they're using their wisdom to perceive. There's not many ways that one can use their strength to perceive a situation, at least as far as somebody being hidden is concerned. Take into consideration if your character is a gladiatorial pit fighter, for instance, and you're coming up against a new fighter who's come from outside the region. There's a lot of rumors about them, how powerful they are, how badass they are, how they've never lost a match. And I know there are abilities and spells that have these kinds of effects, but you're just playing a pit fighter. So when it comes to you asking the game master, how do I determine like this guy's XP, his level, his ability compared to mine? Well, pit fighting is largely based off of your physical stats. Maybe definitely can make a case for charisma being thrown in there as well. You got to play it up and play it up to the crowd. But not every pit fighter does that. So I defer to the physical stats, and namely your strength and dexterity. If you're looking at this pit fighter across the way from you and you're trying to determine their overall ability in comparison to yours, a perception check using strength, which is probably your character's, no pun intended, strong suit, is perfectly legit and makes total sense in the context of the situation. So if somebody says, I'm going to use my strength for a perception check, you might think they're joking, and a lot of times they might just be in jest, because it is kind of a silly suggestion in 90% of occasions. But take that example that I just that I just brought up, and look at that and just try to consider that with any of the skills. Intimidation is the primary one that gets this unspoken rule, but it applies really to any skill that exists in 5e. Intimidation largely because the same pit fighter, for example, who's trying to intimidate their opponent may not necessarily have a good charisma. They might have used it as their throwaway stat and put the 9 in there. So they're like, I'm going to scare this guy before I charge at him. And the GM says, roll intimidation. And they're like, do I have to? It's at a -1. And I didn't take training in it because charisma's not my good stat. Well, how are you trying to intimidate them? Are you, in fact, roaring at them and trying to use your presence? Are you taunting them? Are you talking shit about them? Yes, you're using your charisma to do that. Are you trying to outsmart them? Are you trying to, and that goes either way, whether it's street outsmart them, or whether you're trying to test their knowledge, their book knowledge, and measure it accordingly, and just kind of see if you're able to intimidate them in that respect. Or likewise, what this pit fighter in question might be looking for is, for example, my character, the pit fighter, has an 18 strength as opposed to Wizard Daniel's 14 strength. The pit fighter wants to use that 18 for their intimidation. So make the case that I'm going to flex and I'm going to bulk up, and yeah, I'm going to throw out a couple of "urs" and what have you out there. That doesn't necessarily mean, oh, you're using charisma as the stat now, but you're making a logical point and case for how you're using strength as the primary stat for the intimidation. And that's really all that you need to do. And again, take this into consideration with all of the skills here. There's not that many of them compared to previous editions. I mean, what is this? 5, 10, 15, 18 roughly. I did a kind of quick count there. Now, here in the center of the character sheet, this is the area that you will probably be using most, especially if you're in a heavy combat game like most of our open tables have been so far. Your armor class. This is the number that I, as the GM, or anybody trying to attack you, needs to roll to hit you. And this is the opposing side of it, the attack blocks down here, which, as we covered in the Roll20 tutorial last week, you can add anything to that by searching in this compendium here. I'm just going to go with the tried and true longsword. There it is. Drag, accepting drop from compendium, drop, and look at that. I have 2 new blocks right here for the longsword. If I want them to be more in focus, I can open this up and use this to kind of move them around towards the top if I so wish. If I want to delete a weapon or an effect, or if something has destroyed the weapon, then you use this red hashtag to erase it. But the way the Roll20 character sheets work is all of this is done in one roll. So, one-handed longsword attack, I take a swipe. I get an 8 for the attack for 5 points of slashing damage. Probably not going to hit much of anything unless it's an ooze or a tree or a wall. But that's the example. This 8 I am matching up against this 11. Offense versus defense. Of course, your character may have abilities that affect either one of these numbers. You might say, well, that 8 sucks. I'm going to spend a hero point. Or I have an ability like Reckless Attack that gives me advantage on the attack, so I'm going to use the 13 instead. And there is a downside to that, but we're not going to cover every little thing, just giving examples. So now the 13 hits your 11, and the character with the 11 armor class says, okay, well, I've got this magic spell that gives me a bonus to my defense, or a feat that gives me a bonus to my defense. Any number of possibilities. This is what I mean when I say every rule kind of breaks another rule in D&D. You've got your kind of core mechanics, but then as everybody creates their characters, every character specializes in breaking the system in as balanced a way as possible. Your initiative value, typically you're not going to be rolling this unless my API is down. I have an API that does initiative values for the entire group, but if you do need to determine manually your character's turn in the initiative sequence, this is how you do so. You click that, there it is, and see that red error message. You wanted to send the result of this roll to the turn tracker, but no valid token was selected. Excuse me. This will happen if you don't have a token on the board. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a token on the board if you're playing kind of Theater of the Mind and everything is just getting added manually to the turn order. Ignore that. You don't need a token to send it to the turn tracker. It's more convenient for me because I do use the turn tracker, and as I drag the box around everybody's token, of course, that's going to negate this error message here because all the tokens are valid because they're all connected to character sheets. And even if they're not, we've seen torches and treasure chests get initiative values as well. So I don't know where the line in the sand is there necessarily. But that's going to determine your initiative value right there with that. Speed, in most cases, 30 feet. But there are a number of exceptions, particularly your smaller characters, dwarves and halflings, 25 feet. I believe the Tabaxi, the catfolk race, they get a base speed of 40. And then, of course, if you're playing a barbarian or a monk, or you obtain certain magic items, that can increase exponentially to the absolute most ridiculous lengths. You can use this ruler right here to measure the distances that you're trying to move. So if it's somebody else's turn and there's monsters on the board and you're trying to determine, okay, well, my character's right here and the monster's over here. Yeah, they're 80 feet away. There's some kind of thick tree cover here, but I can still see them pretty well. Yeah, my character on their turn will move up 30 feet to this spot, and then from there they will take an attack on that square. So in almost every battle map, every square is 5 feet, with a rare exception. I don't know on 5e in Roll20 that I've ever used any other kind of measurement for battle maps. Regional maps definitely get like scales by the mile, and for the Star Wars Galaxy map, it was just some ridiculous light years per square astronomical units. Character's hit point value, this is pretty self-explanatory. If you've played any kind of RPG game on any system before, even Zelda, this would represent 5 hearts. And once you're down to a quarter heart or 1 heart, you better find yourself a potion, a fairy, or some means of restoring that. D&D, 5 hit points is very bad. A lot of effects are going to hit that do 5 hit points in and of themselves. And it could hurt. It could hurt very bad and be just the worst for this wizard. So definitely a character that you want to keep towards the back of any given party. Temporary hit points, that's kind of a case by case. Usually spells are going to grant that for you. And then as far as hit dice are concerned, these are activated during... Ooh, thank you so much, sweetheart. Appreciate that. Nice. Starbucks. And food. Happy, happy, happy. Alright. Definitely going to be taking a break here pretty shortly. What did I get? I got a Danish. Yes, I did. Delish. Alright, we'll enjoy that here in a few minutes. Hit dice are used for when your character takes a short rest. And difference between short rest and long rest, in addition to the standard short rest is 1 hour, long rest is 8 hours. And the long rest restores everything to 100%, and short rest only restores a few of your abilities. One of the main differences is that during short rests, you may spend hit dice here, and you'll notice that as your character goes up in levels, this goes up at the same rate. So if you're level 3 character, you have 3 hit dice. During your character's 1 hour short rest, you can spend as many of these as you want to heal up some wounds. And again, because my character's constitution is a 9, I rolled a 4 on the die, but -1 only gives me 3 hit points back. So again, this character is going to be behind the curve when it comes to health restoration for some time until I can at least get that con to a 10. And then how that translates to the long rest side of things is when you take your long rest, the only thing you don't recover 100% of, with the rare exception of magic items that are like usable once per week or once per month or once per year, are those short rest hit dice. The short rest hit dice, you only get back half of your total available value. So it definitely behooves you to spend wisely with these hit dice throughout the adventuring day with your short rests. And if you're playing in the Friday Enemir game, it's especially brutal because the short rest for that is 8 hours and the long rest is 7 days. So recovering from grievous wounds is a lot harder in that campaign. Handing it over here to connect the dots on the left. Inspiration. Some GMs hand it out like candy. Some give it out once per session. Some are pretty rare with it. I tend to use all 3 depending on the theme of the campaign. In short, inspiration, if you click that, you see the little dragon logo pop up. And that will mean that at any time, especially if you're playing on Roll20, I can't speak for other GMs, but because we're always rolling both dice, let's find a good example here. This acrobatics check, a 7 and an 18. So say I roll, and this is I'm jumping over a chasm, and if I fail, I am dead. Because we don't have anybody that's prepared to catch me, we don't have any flying characters, nobody's got a feather fall, I'm dead. I spend the inspiration, and technically in 5e that allows you to re-roll. But again, because we're always rolling 2 dice at the same time, I like to just be very free with it, and okay, so the inspiration changes the 7 to an 18, now you're fine. It makes the inspiration expenditure a bit more of a sure thing, too, as opposed to just bringing back the uncertainty for another moment. But that's up to each table, of course. Proficiency bonus. This is determined by your overall level. Everybody starts at 2, and I think it maxes out at 6. This 2 is added to everything that your character is proficient in. Everything that's got a blue checkbox next to it has a +2 next to it. So as you start to understand the mechanics of 5e, you'll see how all these numbers come into being. I mean, all of them without white checkboxes, the numbers are exactly the same as the attribute modifiers over here on the left. Survival, wisdom, 0. My wisdom, 0. Persuasion, Charisma, I'm not trained in it, but I still have +3 because my Charisma, +3. Same thing up here with the saving throws. Because I'm a wizard, it gives me Intelligence and Wisdom as my trained saving throws. So that gives me the +2 proficiency bonus, plus an additional 2 for my Intelligence, which gives me 4. And sadly, yeah, I mean, it's a good thing I'm trained in the Wisdom saving throw, because otherwise it'd be a 0. Over here to the right side, this is the characteristics section, and this is where you're going to find... Wow, I never knew you could minimize that. Cool little discovery. Click on characteristics, and if you don't need your character bio set right here up in front of you, you can access your features and traits a little quicker. Characteristics for this character, I believe I rolled all of them randomly, but you can look through all the characteristics, not just the ones that are associated with your class and your background. If while searching the Acolyte background, you see something on the next page for Entertainer that you're like, well, I would like this to be my flaw, but it's not under the Acolyte background. It doesn't matter. 5e is very fluid in that respect. In addition to, if you don't like any of the personality traits, ideals, bonds, or flaws, make your own. It's harder to do in that respect because it requires you to be a little bit more creative, but that's what D&D is all about. So definitely get in there, find what fits the character that you have in mind, and if you don't find that, craft your own. Short rest, long rest, we already talked about. These boxes here will sometimes auto-populate, sometimes not, but you can use these to represent resources, expendable resources like arrows, potions, anything that you use and typically don't get back. All of the attack blocks, as we talked about, are all pre-built into here depending on what's added on your character sheet. Additionally, by clicking the spells tab here, we can see the spells that I have. And it looks like they wanted me to have some of these, primarily the attacking ones, set up as attack blocks. So yeah, Sapping Sting, Chromatic Orb, Sword Burst, Immolation. For some reason, this doesn't always happen, though, when you're trying to add these abilities onto your character sheet through the spell block. So make sure to double check your spell tab versus your attack blocks here, because if you just added a fireball and you're really excited to use it, and then the moment comes and you're scrolling through here and you're like, oh, nothing preventing you from just going back to the spells tab and posting using the talk button, the fireball. But you also have to manually roll the dice, and it just takes up a few more seconds. It's all... One thing that I really like about Roll20 is the time crunch factor of it, how it really maximizes the time that you can spend doing the parts of the game that people enjoy the most. And not saying people don't enjoy rolling dice, it's mostly that people don't enjoy doing the math. Down here to the bottom section of the character sheet, languages, weapon proficiencies, these all come in pre-built based on what class you have selected. And likewise, tool proficiencies and custom skills, these will come in based on what class and background you have chosen. In which case, for my guy, I have chosen nothing. All of the standard adventuring gear, all of this just populated immediately into my character's equipment listing based off of the option that I chose at a character creation. Getting a little dry here. Yum yum. Likewise, your character's abilities here that they get for whatever class they are, feats that they've taken, they will all appear here. You can open the gear tab to check any of them, edit any of them that may require such. And anytime I tell you to post an ability or something to the chat log, that's what I'm talking about. Just click the little talk bubble next to whatever ability you're talking about. So if you're asking me, can I do this with my character? I don't, of course, remember every ability. As if you spam it a lot of times with this character over the course of their career, I'll get to kind of remember it and be like, yeah, you don't have to post it anymore. We all remember the mechanics, but as we're getting used to things, that's why I ask, post that to the chat log. Okay, bio section, character sheet completely empty, and I think we covered this on the Roll20 tutorial last time around. Same thing with the spells side. And the gear side as well. If we did not cover this on the Roll20 tutorial, I know we definitely went through this the other night on Thursday night. Open table. Alright, so we've got Daniel. Does he have a token? Yes, he does! Alright, and he's large size. There we go. We're going to want that. That size right there. I need a monster. I'm going to use some bandits. Because why not? We'll copy 2 bandits here. And we're going to do a mock combat after this brief break wherein I enjoy some of this coffee and treats that my lovely, wonderful wife was kind enough to deliver. And I'll be right back. Hey, hello, welcome back. Oh, it's so delicious, I want to just gobble it all down right now, but I don't want to keep you all waiting too long, or for those of you watching the VOD later on, have you guessing too much where the break ends and this picks back up. So, not much left to do here anyway. We've covered the character sheet, and with the Roll20 tutorial last week, how to add pertinent information onto the character sheet, we're going to apply that in practice now. I'm going to scooch all of this over to this side so I can keep everything wonderful. And ideally, can I even... Yes. Use as little of this map as possible so that I can use as much of the VTT as possible. Alright. So, we have an initiative. We have a combat that is broken out. Neither side is surprised. That carries its own set of special rules. We'll cover that in specific when that occurs in-game. API is hopefully working. Wow. I mean... So I rolled a 17, and a 17, and a 17. I just rolled 3 17s on 3d20. And if it wasn't for my dexterity score, which we determined by activating this gear shift here, and add dex tiebreaker to initiative, if this is not checked off, it'll just say 18, 18, 18, and we don't know who necessarily goes first. Although... in 5e, I believe if it's a direct tie between player and monster, player always gets to go first. But if it's a direct tie between player and player, we use the dexterity to determine who's going first out of the two of them. And if it's still a direct tie, then we go into a dice-off. Now, I have rolled top initiative spot here. So getting my character sheet back into play, I am thinking I'm going to cast a Chromatic Orb spell. So I click that, and here's the pertinent information that we need to know. Casting time, 1 action. Each player's turn, and not each monster's turn, because monsters don't get bonus actions. Each player's turn is divided into 3 segments. Your action, your bonus action, and your move. Technically, you also have your reaction and any free actions the GM lets you get away with, but those are all very case by case. Every round, you should strive to use all 3 of these actions if you are able to, and meaning that if you have abilities that you can trigger with bonus actions. Spellcasters typically tend to have a little bit more freedom in that respect, but we'll get into one interesting application at least. Okay, so I'm casting the Chromatic Orb spell. Target any creature I can see within range. I definitely see this dude. I can't move that anymore, so... Hey, look at that. That's not what we want. There we go. Shrink the turn order down. We don't need it anyways. It can be tucked behind my frame here. All of the prerequisites have been met. He's within 90 feet, can see him. Components, verbal, somatic, and material basically means that there's an incantation, some kind of gesturing, and the material component, a diamond worth at least 50 gold pieces. In this instance, let's assume that we have the component. In-game, don't assume you have that component. Anything that's got a significant gold piece value to it, of at least 10 gold pieces or above, I typically want my spellcasters to keep track of. Anything that's less than that, though, like if it says a live fly or bat guano or stuff that you don't necessarily find throughout your normal adventuring day, but are still common enough, you can definitely have those things on your character sheet, no problem. So Chromatic Orb, to attack with it, I go back to the core section, click on the attack block. I'm casting it at level 1. I only have level 1 spells. It would let me cast it up to level 9, but that's breaking the game because I don't have the ability to do that. It takes into account all of the relevant information. A 20 to attack, which is calculated by if you hover over the number. I rolled a 16 on the die, the parenthetical. A +2 to attack from my intelligence. You can see all of this broken down up above there, and a +2 for proficiency. So 20 to hit for pretty damn good damage. It rolled 3 die 8. I got a 1, an 8, and a 7. So 16 damage on this guy, who, if you zoom in close enough, you can see he's only got 11 hit points. So that's instant death. Icon menu, open up any token that you have access to. Click on this little circle, and all of these icons have been purchased and added to the Roll20 library. You can use wings to represent height. All of these black and white ones at the bottom are the default icons that come with Roll20, so some of them don't necessarily have a use, but you still may find some, like the stopwatch we use pretty frequently to mean like haste, the ninja mask for stealth, but I'm sure there are other ones up here that you can also use to represent similar effects. You just really got to look through them, hover over it. Awareness, unaware, awareness, aware, shocked, electrified, sleeping, just so many of these that take into account actual things that you will have need of. Paralyzed, petrified, mirror image. So handy things that you can use. Bardic Inspiration, especially for going from one session to another and you don't remember exactly what spells were lingering on you. Icons are a great way to facilitate that. Okay, so I've killed this guy, but that's really all that I've got. I might have a bonus action spell though. Let's check. It takes an action. It's an action. An action. Rock forward. Yep, also an action. Action. A bonus action. Adjust position. You adjust the location of an ally to a better tactical position. Irrelevant. I don't have any allies. Outmaneuver. A reaction. Don't have that right now. Sneer. You curl your lip in disgust at a creature you can see within range. The target must succeed on a charisma saving throw or take psychic damage equal to 2d4 plus your spell casting modifier. So this I can cast because I have a bonus action. Heart to Heart also takes an action, so this is the only one that fits the bill. Posting that, the Sneer, and there's also a... there's not an attack block for it because there's no need for an attack roll. You could construct one, just take out the attack part, add in the relevant information here. Charisma saving throw, though, from one of these bandits. A DC 12, and they rolled a natural 1. So that is a failed saving throw. Taking psychic damage equal to 2d4 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. I'm a wizard. My spellcasting ability modifier is intelligence. So that +2 again comes into play. 2d4 plus 2 for a total of 10 points of damage. That leaves this guy with 1 hit point. He's going to be very, very angry. I still have a move action. I can move 30 feet. I can use the ruler to kind of measure out just how far I might be able to go here. I can kind of count it off 1 square at a time. Just select my token, use the arrow key. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Or if it's easier to break it down into a 6, because 30 feet of movement is 6 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anything's an option. Diagonal movement does not cost extra, so as long as you're not walking through difficult terrain like this thick bush right here, this would suddenly be 5, 10, 20, 30. It costs double movement to go through the difficult terrain areas like that. But the cool thing about that is, I think I started here. The third option, I go over this occasionally. This is kind of an advanced feature for Roll20, not necessary at all, but it is handy in a few respects. Select your token, and then keep it held with the right, or with the left clicker. And as you're moving, use the right clicker to kind of ping your movement. You'll see those little dots appearing in addition to how many feet your character has moved and how many squares. When you're done, release it. And for yourself, that's all you're going to see, because you saw the whole thing happening while you were moving it. For everybody else, they're going to see your token actually move that path with that line and movement behind it. So very handy in that respect. And again, I left this guy with 1 hit point. So on his turn, here he comes. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Because I moved back, I am now no longer within his melee threatened range, which I'm taking into assumption that that will be his better attack, but we'll see. Oh, he's got a light crossbow, which he shoots, and an armor class of 10 against my armor class of 11. So, near miss in that respect. We're seeing how all these mechanics we were talking about from the Roll20 tutorial, the character sheet tutorial, how they're all being applied here. Attack versus armor class, how movement works, how action works versus bonus action. And just take a look at this with every character that you play. Because, of course, as you level up, you're going to gain new abilities. Looks like Sean is still leveling up, so I'm not going to look at his. I'll look at Abdul. So Abdul here is a level 4 Totem Warrior Barbarian. He should technically be level 6. So I'll update some XP, activate the Character Mancer, hit points. Yeah, we'll roll it. I rolled the average. Okay, so proceeding after that. Path of the Totem Warrior, it shows the new abilities you get. Here's what I was looking for. Beginning at 5th level, you can attack twice instead of once whenever you take the attack action on your turn. It's an important distinction. Casting a spell is technically its own action. There is an action called attack, and there is an action called casting a spell. So if you cast a spell, and then you're kind of looking after that, well, I have extra attack, so now I'm going to take a swing with a weapon. They're technically 2 different actions. So if you're casting a spell, the only way to do something else after that is with a bonus action. Unless, of course, you cast the spell as a bonus action and you still have your primary action. In which case, this might just apply. Like, let's say, for example, Daniel's turn started off with Sneer as a bonus action. Range 30 feet, hit the guy for 10 points of damage. And then I use my movement to rush in at the guys rather than move away. And we're also assuming that Daniel has 5 levels of some kind of fighting class that is permitting the extra attack right here. Because it could be done one of both ways. This is the difference between the ranged spellcaster and the up-close fighter. The up-close fighter, if they had a bonus action spell, toss that, run in, hit one guy once with the attack action, and then because you have the extra attack feature as part of your obtaining 5th level, you now get to attack a second time, probably on the guy standing right next to him, hoping you finish them both off. And, well, I don't know if I have anything else. That might be everything I wanted to cover. I really just wanted to cover attack, move, bonus action, how these apply to your sheet, kind of a general tour of the character sheet, where you can find all this information. And definitely watch this in conjunction with the Roll20 tutorial if you're not familiar with either, and hopefully between the 2 of these, they will provide you the information that will help you find success at not only my tabletop, but any tabletop that you play at. Thank you so much for watching this. Hope you have a great day all. Are you with us?